Welcome today to the Aurora Institute Symposium 2020 virtual session. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Susan Patrick. I'm the CEO of the Aurora Institute, and I'll be moderating today's session. Today's webinar is on designing for equity, and we've seen how the pandemic has exacerbated well-documented opportunity gaps. It will be critical for us to create more personalized instruction and extend learning opportunities. We can't snap back to the traditional one-size-fits-all education. We must focus on meeting each student's needs holistically and with an equity focus. Today's webinar will be part of these sessions that began in August and extend through November. And next slide, please. Please use the chat box to introduce yourself, ask questions, comments, and to share any solutions or insights from your own experiences and work throughout today's session. We invite you to share what you're learning on Twitter with hashtag Aurora 2020. Please note today's session will be recorded and archived and available for later use. And we are grateful to have our terrific panel of speakers here with us today. Next slide. So our presenters are experts in the field of personalized learning, equity, and human-centered design approaches to build truly equitable systems in their place. Participants will also explore what it means to innovate for justice. We'll take a look at the importance of equity strategies and culturally responsive instruction to meet the needs of students online and in the classroom. I would like to introduce Carla Vigil, Chief Executive Officer for the Equity Institute, and Juliana Charles Brown, Charlie, the Director of Systems Transformation at KnowledgeWorks. And now I'll turn it over to Carla. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm going to get myself situated here, and I'm going to share my screen so that I can begin the presentation. Here we go. Yes, thank you, Susan, for that great introduction, and for also remembering that song. That was pretty cool. So good afternoon and good morning to those in the room, depending on where you are. There's different time zones, so it could be morning, it could be afternoon. Here in Rhode Island, the afternoon is 3 p.m. and I gotta say, we are experiencing some amazing weather. It's 77 degrees out here, and listen, I will take that in a November day. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself and about life in general. So welcome to our straight out of straight out of COVID-19 session. Our title is heavily influenced by NWA's Straight Outta Compton song. As you all know, this is not our original idea. We totally stole it. So I just want to put that out there and name it. To be transparent, we proposed this session back in the spring. And when Charlie and I talked about the title, we weren't sure if COVID was still going to be relevant. And as you can see, it definitely still is. And it's something we're all still battling. And it's definitely something that's impacting many people's lives. We hope that you're all ready to engage with us in the next hour to not only name how COVID-19 continues to impact our communities, but also how to name real actions that we can take in order to build equitable systems. So Susan gave us a great introduction. We just want to show you our faces here. Additional photos. You will also see down here that we have our Twitter handle. So we're both pretty active on Twitter. So make sure to shout us out, show us some love, or ask questions throughout the session if that's something that that you feel open to doing. I did want to give you a little bit more about my background, and so I'll talk a little bit about that, and so will Charlie. She'll talk a little bit about herself. So my name is Carla Vigil. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. Equity Institute is an organization that I helped co-found in the beginning of this year. Actually, we became a nonprofit. We're based in Providence, Rhode Island. We do work here and also throughout the country. We work to develop innovative solutions that build a more diverse, anti-racist, inclusive learning and professional environment. I was born in El Salvador and raised in the west end of Providence. It's a small urban community here in my town. And my background includes working in education with a specific focus on equity, multicultural, and social justice education. I'm a former classroom teacher, fourth grade. And I've spent time developing frameworks and tools to support culturally responsive teaching. About 4 years ago, I left the classroom. Actually, I was pushed out, but that's another story for another day, and co-founded a grassroots initiative called Edu Leaders of Color Rhode Island. This initiative worked to create an ecosystem that supports and elevates the voices of BIPOC educators and leaders. To deepen our impact, earlier this year is when Equity Institute was born to push for school transformation. We believe that disruption happens or starts in the classroom, and educators and leaders must lead with an anti-racist and equitable lens. So I'm excited to be here with you and to dive into this extremely important work. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Charlie.
Hey there, everybody. So great to be with you all today, even in this virtual space. I know we're all really looking forward to the time we can be back together at Aurora, the Aurora conference, and we hope that happens sooner rather than later. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, plus, if you know me, my friends and family call me dude and bro, and that becomes more comfortable the more you get to know me over time. And I'm really excited to be here talking about this today. I started my career in the New York City public schools, working in policy, academic policy specifically. And so talking about the systems and structures that we kind of really have come to think of as school. But when we really start to look at them and unpack them, and this is what I started to learn the more I did this work in New York, really can have some pretty problematic underpinnings, assumptions, and then impacts on the students that we serve. And so after New York, I had the great privilege to move to Massachusetts and join the Center for Collaborative Education, which is where I met my good friend Carla Vigil, and we began to talk about really powerful ways that networks can support disruptive work. And from there, I've joined the team at KnowledgeWorks, continuing to explore how the intersection of personalized and competency-based approaches are really a way to redesign the system for equity. So very excited to kind of dive into that conversation. So let's get started, shall we?
Absolutely. So what we want to do is take some time to see who's in this virtual space. And because we have a small, strong group of people, what we're going to do is ask you to just unmute yourself and share your name, your affirming pronouns, if that's something you feel comfortable with. And also answer this question. What are you carrying today? We're all entering this space with a lot of ish, right? And it was a very emotional weekend for many. So I don't know about you all, but I think it's impacting the way that I feel today. And so we're entering the space with different feelings and different emotions. So we want you to just say your name, unmute yourself, say your name. And if you don't feel like unmuting yourself, that's totally fine. You could just put it in the chat, but please let us know your name, your affirming pronouns, and what you're carrying today. For me personally, I'm carrying joy. Like I said, we have nice weather right now. I think my country is in a better place. And so that's how I'm feeling today.
And for me, I am thinking, I feel sort of renewed with energy towards my purpose.
Hi, my name is Michael Brownstein. I guess I refer to myself as he and him, and hello friends. And I guess it's not so much carrying. I guess I'm sort of feeling like I've let go. I feel some relief, and that's what's more around me.
Thank you, Michael. And nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Tony DeKendre? Or maybe not. That's okay. We'll just.
I'm Tony.
Oh, okay. Hey, Tony.
Yeah. Hi, I'm from Moorhead. I'm involved in our new online school here and just kind of trying to figure it all out. And I would say I'm still unfortunately carrying a lot of stress. It feels like we should be beyond survival mode by this point, but we really aren't. So, but just kind of trying to figure out how to best serve all students and create an environment that's, going to work for everyone. So.
Thank you, Tony. All right, so thank you, and we'll just, if anybody else wants to add their name, pronouns, and what they're feeling, one word to describe what they're feeling, just go ahead and add it in the chat box. And we will go ahead and move on to the next slide, which is our learning outcomes, which I'm not gonna read out loud because I think that it was in the registration, it was online, so I think you're familiar with what we plan to use this next hour going over, and how we plan to engage, and what will come out of here. I think you have a good understanding of that. However, I do want to highlight that the main goal for today is to just discuss how COVID-19 has impacted our world, specifically in education, and name those impacts and begin to understand how to take steps to building the world that we want to see ourselves live in, a just and equitable one. Please note, we wanted to make sure that we highlighted this as well, that we're going to be discussing COVID-19, and I think this can be a sensitive topic for many of us because of its impact that it's had on many communities, specifically communities of color. So we realize that, the virus has had a devastating outcome on many people. And if you do not feel like, tackling this issue in conversation, please feel free to step back. There's no judgment, and we're okay with that. In terms of our community agreements, we really just have one, and that's to be gentle with each other. And we're online, and there's tech. We operate from a tech world now, and so just be gentle with yourself, be gentle with us as we go through our session today, and as also we think of ways to modify some of the activities that we've designed for you today, because I think we might have to do that given that our group is a small group. I was just telling Susan that one of the principles at EI from Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown's work, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but if you're not, you should check her out, is small is good, small is all. So we are really okay with our small group here. And so I think that some of our activities will change, and we were planning for breakout rooms, but I think we're all gonna stay together since it's such a small group. And I think that it'll be really beneficial for us and valuable. I think we'll take something valuable away from this in this next hour. So we just wanna, I just wanna bring that up so you're aware. And
yeah, I think it personally just kind of seems like we have an opportunity now to have a conversation with each other. So we'll take you through our content, and I think, we might even get somewhere that we didn't expect, which is exciting to me. So as Carla mentioned, we didn't really have a sense when we put in this session, however many months ago it was now, that, where we would be with COVID. I think we all hoped that we would be in a different place than we in fact are. But really, this session is actually not going to be all that much about COVID. What it's going to be about is it's going to be about giving you tools to analyze situations with a big C critical lens. And today we're going to practice with the example of COVID. So for my competency ed friends who are either on the call or maybe going to be watching the call at some point, right? That's like with a competency. We say, we're working on analysis, but we're going to use the topic of the Civil War today. So COVID-19 is our content, but what we're really going to try to talk about and the skills we're sharpening are our critical lens and a lens to serve every student. So to start out, we wanted to ask the question, what have been the impacts of COVID-19? And this is just an observational question, right? What have the impacts been? We've seen impacts across health for those who have been affected, health and mortality. The economic impact is undeniable in our society, right? We've got folks that have been out of work for months now, folks whose work lives have changed dramatically with the pause in traditional in-person schooling. We've got folks that are, who are already in shaky positions before the pandemic, now in dire straits. The mental health impact of this moment, even if you haven't experienced a personal health challenge or a health challenge in your family or community, and even if you're in a relatively stable economic position, this has still been mentally and emotionally taxing with social isolation. And if you have experienced any of those additional impacts, it can be even stronger toll on mental health, especially if you're walking into the pandemic with existing mental health challenges. And we'll get more into the ways that COVID has impacted education in our next discussion. But I'm curious, just to take the next, minute or two, what are some of the other impacts that you've observed, right? What are areas broadly where our lives have changed, our society has been impacted by COVID-19? And you can share in the chat if that's where you're most comfortable, or feel free to unmute yourself if you want to share something out.
On a small level, in our family, it gets down to who does the shopping in the house, because we've had some sickness around our place, and so we've been thinking about, so what does that really mean, and how we navigate the world outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I would also, I would add, personally for us and our family, running an org and having a 3-year-old has probably been, it's been such a task, and it's been so challenging figuring out, whether or not we send him to school. Right now we're homeschooling him, and it's almost impossible, and it's definitely not sustainable. And so just leading some of this work and talking about all these impacts, but also trying to take care of our family has been heavy. It's actually, it's impacting my own mental health.
It's real. Yeah. Anybody else? Hugs, handshakes, and high fives coming in from Ms. Christina in the chat. All right, so let's take a pass. And so we started out with what? We're observing what are the impacts, right? So the next tool in a line of critical analysis is how have impacts been disproportionate across lines of difference, right? So what you'll notice here is that we're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about if, right? Because we know that they are. We know that impacts of COVID have been disproportionate, and that disproportionality has stacked up across various lines of difference, right? So when we go back and we think about our health disparities, we know that our communities of color have been significantly more impacted, both in terms of infection rates, hospitalization rates, and mortality rates. And the same goes, we know the economic impact has been more deeply felt in communities of color, in those who are immunocompromised and therefore not able to work. We understand that the types of folks who are in a lower socioeconomic status and have jobs that require in-person work have had to make really challenging decisions about whether or not to go back to work. And a lot of that's intersected with what's going on for them at home and who's in the home, and decisions that were already hard pre-pandemic are getting even harder, and the stakes get higher the longer the pandemic persists. For the elderly among us, and for the very young among us, I think that the impacts are significant. Social isolation, forced social isolation across both of those groups has gone up at periods of time where social connectedness becomes most important developmentally for our youngest ones. And as the elderly lose folks in their own age bracket due to sort of natural patterns of death, social connections outside the family become really important, and the pandemic has deprived them. And what we also know is that parents, even in our last discussion, are bearing an enormous burden on behalf of our society to keep us all safe when schools closed, and navigating homeschooling, and especially those of our parents who are doing it on their own and also still trying to work. And so if I can get the next slide, this how question really gets us to think about where those lines of difference are showing up in the impacts of something like COVID-19. And then we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening, right? And when we start to look at this, what we can see is that structural oppression is what underpins much of what shows up here, because COVID-19 is not going to create disproportionate impacts. What it's going to do is it's going to identify them, and it's going to sort of expose them and make them more apparent, right? It's like adding gasoline to a fire that was already slowly burning. And really what I mean when I say structural oppression is years of policies and practice that reaffirm a culture that some folks within our society have opportunity, security, that's given to them by privileges that are afforded to them by policies and practices, and others of us in a society are routinely denied that power, privilege, and security. And something like a COVID-19, when we see those impacts, is really going to highlight how power, privilege, security, and opportunity flow within our society. Carla, anything else to add there?
No, I think that I feel like we need to leave some space, and we are going to provide space for you all to kind of come up with your thoughts and ideas about some of the structural policies and systems that are in place that really have led us to be in this situation that we're in today. So I will take you to our next part, which is really thinking about the impact of COVID-19, but particularly in our schools. And so I'm sure we all, we're either educators, we work in education system, so we're all really familiar with what is going on, what's the layout right now in our country with as it pertains to COVID-19 and in our schools, and decisions that our leaders have to make and our teachers have to make in the classroom. And so what we want to do is push you to think about really like name and highlight these impacts that are really influencing influence the way actually we think about education as a whole. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I've really have sat in reflection to think about, what does this mean for us? How are we going to move forward? And what does education look like in the upcoming years, right? What are the long-term effects that COVID-19 has in our schools? So what we want you to do, and we have a few people on, what do you think, Charlie? You think we should do maybe 2 breakout rooms? Yeah, maybe we'll do 2 breakout rooms. I think that's what we'll go with. Oh, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Suzanne, who's on here. I already gave a shout out to Michael. We know our friends. We have some friends here, so it's really nice to see your faces. So we're gonna definitely do breakout rooms just for, we'll just do 2. And what we want you to do is use Jamboard. And I don't know if you are familiar with Jamboard, but I'm gonna do a quick not tutorial, just give you quick instructions on how to use it. So I'm gonna add a link, or Charlie will add a link in the chat box as I talk through the directions here. When you go to that link, you'll notice these different what they call frames, but they're like pages. On each page, there'll be one question. We want you to answer the question. So you'll answer it with your group. You're going to use this icon here. You're going to just click on that. A sticky note will show up and you just type on the sticky note and it will leave it on the online page, so to speak. Then we're going to come back together and we're going to talk about our answers and see what folks have added on there, how they've responded to the questions. So I'm going to stop share here so I could just go ahead and break us out into rooms. However, oh, actually Natalie is supposed to do that, I think, for us. So Natalie, if you could just make two breakout rooms, that'd be great.
Wonderful. I will go ahead and open the rooms now.
Thank you. All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed that because I mean, I know in my group, we had some really good conversation. And so what we want to do now is maybe take a few minutes just to share out what people shared on the Jamboard and maybe just debrief and share out some responses. We hope that was somewhat helpful. I think it was. I know in my group we had a good conversation. So give me a second as I share the screen. We were trying to complete question 3. So why don't we start with 1? And just take a minute to observe some of the answers. The question was, what have been the impacts of COVID-19 in our schools and what do you see? So we can start with my group just because I'm going to volunteer you all, Christina and Suzanne, just to talk a little bit about some of the responses you added here. Suzanne, you're muted.
Sorry, in different ways we were talking about like division that's happened. And just that in many ways there's been a like division because we don't know. We've been asked to become experts on something that we don't know. The teachers I'm working with and Christina was sharing the experience that she's seeing, and a lot of the theme is about division, lack of knowledge about how to be a solution to this. We're not experts in this field. I mean, we're field experts in education, but not in COVID. So how to make education safe, and then all of these different levels of division that come because of that.
Thank you. Christina, did you want to add anything?
No, I think she captured right on.
Right. Unit, there's just no way how to move forward. And yeah, division was the theme.
For sure. I think that's what I highlighted here too, division between community members. What we're seeing here is everybody pointing the fingers and calling out instead of coming together as a community to solve some of these issues. So unfortunately, that's been like a through line that we identified. How about your group, Charlie?
Yeah, so we were just getting into adding things to the Jamboard before we wrapped up, but I'm happy to share. I know that one of the things that Tony shared was just a real sense of exhaustion, feeling like that everybody is exhausted with kind of being in survival mode for so long, conditions constantly changing. And then really sort of, I also heard in your comment, Tony, a lack of stability. So that was a big one that came across. And then Michael actually was able to share with us that positive that his daughter and his personal experience has become a more self-directed learner. And I think one of the things, Michael, if I can share out on your behalf that you shared was the that she had the benefit of being in a smaller learning environment that was able to meet her needs.
Sure, thank you. I think that's happening to my son too. He's 14 and online and just figuring things out on his own because he has to. So we'll see how that turns out in 3 years. Hopefully good. I don't know if you all had a chance to answer the other questions, but I just want you to look at this. We're not going to go over it. We're going to move on to our next part of the presentation, but just maybe I'll read like one of these out loud. So what we talked in this group was that it seemed like affluent children were still doing okay. So independent schools are okay. And again, it speaks to the disproportionate impact that COVID has on schools. So when you have money, then you're able to have resources and you're able to continue with your with things in a much more smoother way, than others.
Yeah, and our group actually also highlighted that engagement has been sort of disproportionate. The ability for folks to provide support for a myriad of reasons to keep their kids engaged or provide different experiences when the learning experiences provided by their schools may not be engaging. And so that was something that came up in our group as well.
Definitely. And then we definitely want to go over this one because I think this one speaks to what Charlie was talking about in one of the slides as to why there's been such a huge impact. Why is this happening? So what are why are the impacts disproportionate, and what are the structural and cultural reasons? And we only had time to do two, but I thought these were the two major ones and wanted to see if somebody could speak into these two or any other ones that you might want to share.
Well, I could speak to a third one. The things that I deal a lot with are technology and bandwidth, and that's a differentiator in all communities that, where they're under-resourced communities, whether that's rural, suburban, or urban. And, it's hard to deliver remote instruction if there's not a reliable bandwidth.
Absolutely, Michael, and thank you for saying that. I think we're going to go into talking about some of those, elements of what's lacking in schools. I think this question, we know one of the outcomes of structural systems that are rooted in racist systems leads to things like a digital divide, lack of, computers at home, lack of funding in schools. So our goal here was to look at the bigger picture and also think about this, I'm going to go back here. Maybe I can't. The structural oppression slide that Charlie was talking about, right? So there are consequences and there are real impacts on, I think I need to stop sharing this, share my screen again, on some of these systemic issues that we have. And so, I think making those connections, that it's critical so that we're aware and that we're able to build new systems that do not perpetuate these inequities. And I'm going to go ahead. I don't know, Charlie, if you want to add anything, but if not, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next. Slide, which
as you get that slide loaded up, I can kind of just speak into what we're really hoping for you to take away from this series of questions is this idea of looking at getting to the concept of structural oppression and racism, classism. Using this set of questions is to say, what am I seeing, right? And then begin to analyze, as you're getting into critical analysis, how are the things that I am observing, interacting, and acting, and then why, right? And what are the structural, institutional, cultural factors that are causing things to be this way? And so COVID-19 for us is a really good example of how you have to understand the why in order to be able to disrupt patterns of systemic inequity.
Yeah, now we're going to move into, okay, so what do we do about this? We highlighted some of these things that some of the inequities that exist. And so we really want to get you to think about how can we disrupt, how can we change this system? And that's been like the $1 million question, right? For a very long time. Like, how can we change our systems? What can we do? There's been tons of, folks advocating for equity, advocating for racial equity, now advocating for anti-racist policies in schools. And so we really want to get you to think about where do we begin to do that? So in order to be a disruptor, though, we really want to highlight, and what Charlie was saying to her point, is to understand the why. If we can't understand the why, then we can't possibly move forward. Also, we want to name that COVID-19 did not create inequities in our schools. It only exposed it and exacerbated it. And we know that to be true. And in a way, it's, I think, opened minds of many people that were not directly impacted by some of these impacts, right? So people who are closest in proximity to these inequities are the ones who really feel it, who have the lived experiences. And if you don't, unfortunately, you can never really speak into it. So I think COVID-19 has really allowed for the country and the world to see that there's something wrong with our systems, and it's been wrong for a very long time. And so I think that on a positive note, there are many people that are coming together now and saying, yes, I may not understand, even folks that may not understand it, but I'm willing to learn about it. And I'm willing to become aware, to educate myself and to understand what's going on in terms of education in our country, in terms of understanding why education was built, who was it built for, why was it built, who does it benefit, and how does it continue to perpetuate these deep-rooted inequities. So we're going to talk about that in the last maybe 15 minutes, and we're going to get you some real action or principles that can guide you through your work beyond today.
So I think, what you said, Carla, about why was education designed, who was it designed for? When Carla and I were designing this session, we were talking about, for years, we've been talking about how the traditional school system was designed, right? So when we went through that set of questions, what's happening? How is it occurring? Now, why is it true? The why that we really came to is that traditional school was not actually designed to meet the needs of every child. And in fact, traditional models of schooling were designed to be inequitable. So in the very nature of the systems and structures and patterns that were built, that inequity is both a function, a structure, and a purpose of that design, right? So from the very beginning, traditional models of schooling rely on assumptions about intelligence and our ability to be able to assess that intelligence that comes directly from the minds of noted eugenicists. The types of things that are included in the traditional canon are privileges, white, Western, masculine, Cartesian, colonialist, ableist ways of knowing and being. And we're not saying throw that canon out, we're saying expand. I think something we talk about a lot of time in the Aurora community is the construction of sorting and stratification, right? The kids who are privileged by being A kids and deprivileged by being anything other than that. And the system is designed to do that. And then this system that both upholds a system of meritocracy by perpetuating its very myth, right? That this myth that those who try harder or are more capable will get more. And when really we know that myth is belied by years of systemic oppression that make meritocracy fundamentally untenable in the current system. And then this fact that often the first place that students learn their place in the socio-political order of our capitalist, racist society is in school. It's the first place that they begin to interact with that outside of the home. So if school is designed in this way, what we know is that it's our responsibility to redesign it, right? Because if we are identifying that the root of these issues of equity within school is the very design of that system, then we know that we have to redesign it. So what we want to do is we want to close out by giving you some principles to be able to for those of you who have begun the redesign process, continue to sharpen your design. And for those of you that are considering the redesign process for the first time, we want you to start with this question, right? If we design school with the very principle that every child has something about them that is brilliant and worthy, And our job as a system of education is to identify that, nurture it, and help the children develop it. What would that system be like? Carla, you're muted, my friend.
I'm muted. I hate when I do that. And before we get you to really think about that, we're going to close out with a discussion about this. And just please know that, you know, we had an hour, so it's this is a lot of work, right? And to, you know, try to do this work all within an hour is totally against actually my principles, right? Because it just can't happen. So we're leaving you. We did want to leave you with some of these principles that we highlighted, and there's 3 of them, so it can really ground you in your work, and so that you can really think about it and reflect. Principles are important. They remain constant in the universe, in our lives, no matter what, unlike values. So when we have values, sometimes values change, principles don't. So principles actually govern our values. So even if we might have a disagreement, if we go back to our principles, we could leave the work because those principles are the same. So we want you to look at these 3 principles as a way of guiding you in your work. So if you come across something that is challenging or you have a question, go back to these principles, think about it, and then begin to design for equity. So the first one is all learners are equally valuable to our society in different ways, right? Charlie mentioned that our systems were designed to oppress certain groups of people. And we know this to be true because of the state of our country today and all the research that backs it up. And we know that this starts in the classrooms, and it happens in the classroom as well. We want to build schools that are designed to develop every child in the best possible way, and not to sort them or stratify them. So we want to make sure that when you're working, you work from this mindset where you believe that all learners are equally valuable to our society in different ways. And it is our collective responsibility to create that system which identifies and nurtures the brilliance of each learner. And I want to also highlight the fact that we all play a role in this system, and you know, right now we're not talking about power, but it's important to highlight that because, you know, we might do this work with teachers, but they only have a certain level of power, right? And so that's why we think it's really important to bring all people in this work, because people hold power in different spaces. And so some of this work, we need, you know, policy level work to be happening. We need district level work to be happening, community level work to be happening, all at the same time in order to really design for equity. The second one is all learners get what they need to support their academic and social emotional work, right? So right here, I want to talk about, as you know, as a collective group, that we want to ground ourselves in understanding that people are different, kids are different. They hold multiple levels of intelligence, and their culture and background plays an important role in how we decide we're going to meet their needs. Here's where we really dig into, you know, defining equity. Equity is used in many different places, and it's important for us to unpack that word and have a shared language in whatever communities you're working within. At EI, we acknowledge that equity is different from equality. So you'll notice these 2 visuals here. You notice on the left side, usually when we do this work, I have people work with these images to think about equality and equity, kind of like the fence metaphor. You'll notice on the left side, everybody has the same red shoes. On the right side, people have different shoes. And we take this images from inspiration from Enid Lee, who says that equality is giving everybody the same pair of shoes. Here you go. Everybody has the same shoes. You're all good. But equity is actually giving everyone a pair of shoe that fits. And so that's really like the approach that we want to think about when we're in the classrooms and teaching our students, or if we're a leader preparing our teachers. This is the perspective that we really want to make sure that you're you know, making decisions and operating within a system. Our third principle is really centering culturally responsive teaching. That's really what this principle is doing. So learners, cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives should be used as conduits for teaching them more effectively. Now, this is, partly is a definition from Geneva Gay's work, who's a scholar and researcher around culturally responsive teaching. And this is really about centering students' identities in every single place of the school, right? Every single way. It's about thinking about students' identities and unpacking that in every way, and leveraging that to making sure you are building relationships with students, holding them to high expectations, providing them with curriculum that's relevant to them, and providing them with the support that they need, no matter how different it is from your own experiences or what you believe is right. It's about the learner and really catering to the learner, but really understanding their cultural background and being competent enough to understand different perspectives. So those that was my my spiel for the three principles. And what we want to do is now just pose this question to you all, and then we're gonna have maybe a quick share out, maybe one or two responses, and we will then close with some great words from Angela Davis. So the question is, how might have schools designed for equity responded differently to the COVID-19 crisis?
And I'll just acknowledge that some of you may work in schools that have been designing for equity. So maybe you already have some ideas. You can give us some advance notice. Because I know the Aurora community has been thinking about redesign for a long time now. So
Yep, good point.
I just think, this is Susan, just weighing in across the field. It's been really interesting to see districts and schools that had some online programs or blended programs and the whole shift to COVID. They actually, a lot of them really struggled because they didn't have this for everyone. Whereas I will say the schools that were more competency based with a real focus on equity strategies, specifically the equity strategies that had students building power of setting their own goals and their learning every day, and coupled with really strong relationships and advisories, when they made the shift, they were able to make the shift school-wide across systems. And that was a really interesting learning. It was the technology comes second, but the design and the human connection comes first.
Yes. Yep. I'm just gonna, I didn't want to talk because I wanted to give Michael, Susanna, Christina, Tony an opportunity to speak, but I love that, Susan. I gotta say that I second that and have seen it work with my son doing virtual, and the Met School, or Big Picture Learning School here, being like really prepared because they already had systems that slightly mirrored what they were going into, and like self-directed learning, passion based projects. And so although it's been difficult for him, in terms of being online by himself and not having the physical opportunity to be with people, I think he's thriving more than in other places for sure. And I think those system that Big Picture Learning believes in, competency based, has worked in his advantage.
yeah, and I'll just say I've one of the schools that I work with here in Massachusetts launched 3 years ago with a fully competency-based model, including competency-based graduation requirements. The things that they haven't had to think about: how will we adjust our attendance policy? How will we figure out where our kids are, when maybe we don't see them every day? How will we adjust for kids being in different places because they already had all that figured out before the pandemic, because they had such deep relationships with their kids, and we're so attuned on an individual level to where they were, that a lot of the decisions that other folks ended up spending a lot of time with, they were able to move into adjusting to the new reality, and so I've really been able to focus on how to maintain a really positive and connected school culture in like extremely less than ideal situations for doing so. So I've really appreciated that.
Thank you all. Thanks, Charlie, for that last comment. We appreciate your time. We appreciate this hour that you've spent with us, listening to us. And so we wanna leave you and close up this session with Angela Davis' quote, which she states, to be a radical simply means grasping things at the root. And I think it speaks to the why and knowing the historical context of education, knowing like the roots of the inequities that exist in our country. It's so important for us to all move forward as a collective community. So other than that, I think we're good. I think Susan, you have like a survey maybe?
Sure, we'll just wrap it up by first starting to thank you, Carla and Charlie, for this session. And we'll be spending lots more time over the coming months and years unpacking this more and more. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing. For those of you attending, we love your feedback. And if you just, we'll drop this survey into the chat. If you can just give us our feedback, we're always looking for how we can improve, and appreciate your comments. Just next slide, please. As a reminder, we'll be recording and sharing this session back out so you can share it with your colleagues. And we hope you'll be joining us soon for more webinars on these important topics. One of the underlying things I think we just hit on at the end is in our discussions, whether you're in face-to-face or hybrid or online models, equity-driven designs and competency-based designs that make sure we meet students where they are and get all students to high levels of building knowledge and skills are really critical. And so looking deeper at competency-based learning, those schools and districts that had competency-based structures that were really good at meeting students where they are for the whole child, were able to make this shift. And so unpacking different areas of this is going to be really important us to look for in this time that we're in. We hope you'll consider joining us again soon. So next slide is just to wrap and say thank you, stay connected, and if there's anything that we can do for you, we're here. We look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.